Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. It's David Hodge. Welcome. All right, brothers and sisters. We're rushing to the time of unprecedented trouble like no other, and never will there be. We're heading for darkness, brothers and sisters. It's about to get really dark. And there's no coming back from this situation, brothers and sisters. This is what has to be done. This is what has to be done, brothers and sisters. And this whole thing, the situation that's taking place in the world, in the Middle East, here in America, it's all centered around you, brothers and sisters. Because you are God's chosen people. You are the true seed of Abraham. And there's been a way prepared for you. Because God did not forget about you. So get ready, brothers and sisters. Because we're getting out of here. We're not staying here in America. That's what your enemies want for you. Since we're getting out of here. Okay, brothers and sisters, have you been paying attention to what's taking place in the Middle East? Things, they're not going to go well. Even though there's talks of development in the peace, right? They claim it's a major diplomatic development, claiming that Iran has officially responded to the U.S. proposal, which is aimed at ending the war. We know that this thing's not going to end, but this is what they want, the United States, America. Their focus is on ending the war, security in the Strait of Hormuz, future negotiations as such. But like we explained, this thing is not going away. It's only going to get worse. And this so-called ceasefire is still weak and fragile. Despite this development, the military tensions remain extremely high. Israel continues strikes in Lebanon and against Iranian-linked targets. Iran-backed drones activity has reportedly expanded into the Gulf areas. Now we talked about the Strait of Hormuz, the crisis in that situation still continues. It remains one of the biggest global concerns. Shipping, oil, transit, and regional security are still under pressure. The oil markets remain unstable worldwide. Regional tensions spreading. Drone threats and incidents involving Gulf countries like Qatar, UAE, and Kuwait, the US and Israel are still on alert. The US maintains major military forces in the region. Israel says that this conflict is not over, despite the peace discussions, as we already know. Satan can't help himself. You want to do the works of America. You want to do what you did, America? Commit genocide, doing all these sick, twisted things. That's who they are. You see? So they're claiming, as we know, it's not going to happen. Ending the war, and then they want to push for limits on Iran's nuclear program. So the whole point is this ceasefire. It's not going to last long. It's weak, fragile, it's unstable, it could collapse quickly. And the global energy prices and regional security remains heavily affected. So so-called peace talks, right? They're still fighting and drone threats and tension across the Middle East, which is still keeping the region on edge. So, like we explained, brothers and sisters, this is this is not going away anytime soon. We know exactly how this thing is going to end. It's going to end with the defeat of the U.S. and Iran. As we know, excuse me, we are at the time with Michael and his angels versus the dragon and his angels. That's who we are in time, brothers and sisters. With Michael and his angels. Michael is the God, Master Prophet Muhammad, and his angels is Iran and Syria versus the dragon and his angels. The dragon being the House of Assad and his angels, America, Britain, and false Israel. Well, we know exactly how that's going to end. Like I said, with the defeat of the dragon and his angels. See, so America, Britain, and the other side is going to be defeated. American Britain will be kicked out of the Middle East. False Israel will be isolated for its destruction. And it's going to be a new authority and power in the Middle East with Iran and Syria taking over. So what does this mean? What does it mean for America? Well, America is going to start this situation is going to lead to energy crisis here in America. And eventually it's going to be a total economic collapse. Total economic collapse. You know what that means? The oil. Because they're not going to be able to have any. They're not going to, once this thing takes, once they get defeated and kicked out of the Middle East, they're not going to have access to oil. In this reality, you have to have oil to run your economy. So without the oil, total economic collapse, famine, no food, no water, no oil, no gas, total, utter economic collapse, severe social unrest, no nothing, no electronics, no, no kickbacks, no concerts, no parties, no liquor, no smoking, no nothing. People freezing to death. People freezing to death, not having energy for heating in the dead of winter. Talking about extreme times, brothers and sisters, unprecedented. People eat. People eat constantly. There won't be no food, none. Imagine that. People freezing, they're hungry, cold, no nothing. Reality totally shut. Completely shut. It's completely out, lights out. You see? So imagine all that happening on top of what's taking place in the Middle East. What's coming here, it's going to be worse than anything you can imagine. Even our own experience, which was horror. Horror. Our experience was unimaginable. We were completely dehumanized past the imaginable. Hung us, burnt us, fed our children to gators, ripped our skin off, put them on puppets, cut our head off, played nigga ball. They did everything you could think of, branded us, decapitated us, amputated us, disemboweled us, anything that you could think of. They did it, raped, made us miserable 24/7. What's taking place? And so think about what I'm saying. On top of anything you know, any great recessions, any great depressions, any severe depressions or great recessions or world wars, any bombings, any massacres, any sick, twisted stories that you ever heard of, it's going to be worse than that. It's all coming here. It said men's hearts will be failing them. Men's hearts will be failing them. Heart failure from the expectation of those things that's coming, which are coming on the earth, coming into America, for the powers of the heaven will be shaken. meaning the authority switch, the power and authority switch in the Middle East, Iran and Syria, with the defeat of with the defeat of American Britain, false Israel in the house of Saud. You see, they're going to be defeated. False Israel will be eliminated. Power switch, powers in heaven shaken. It is going to cause men to have heart failure from the expectation, meaning it hasn't happened. The expectation of these things, it means it hasn't come here yet. Just what they anticipate is going to take place here. They're going to have heart attacks. They're not going to be able to handle it. They can't handle that. People going to be driving, boom, flying out of the sky, boom, hitting stuff. In factories, getting mangled up in machines. People going to be in places, anybody operating any machinery, running into stuff. People going to be thinking, people going to be falling out, eating their food. People think, they're going to lose it. Because what's going to take place here is going to be terrible. Woo! It's going to be bad, brothers and sisters. No good news. No good news for those participating with America. That's why we tell our brothers and sisters about their vision. We tell you about, we tell you that you had a second option. But you don't have to go through all these things, brothers and sisters. You're going to be here during the time all this stuff is happening, but you don't want to be caught up in being part of their body, being associated with America. You want to come out of these things. You want to invest in yourself. Invest in yourself. Double down on yourself. Your discipline. Get your nature back. You got to get the thinking that they got their thinking wrapped around your brain. You got to get rid of that thinking. We got to get back to your thinking, which is the unsealed scriptures. The unsealed scriptures of Revelations is our mind, the information of this time, that we're going home, we're getting out of here. We're not staying here in the land of our imprisonment. Since you've been fooled to stay here. So you have to start to put yourself in position to do for self, to have thorough knowledge of self from the information being given. So if you know better, you do better. You start to do and apply these things so you can get the hell out of here. Because if you stay here, everything here is going to be burnt up. So I mean, anything you invest in, including yourself, is going to be burnt up. You see? So we tell our people, invest in yourself, brothers and sisters. We're telling you got a second option. It's the Abraham covenant. Said we're leaving. You see? Says we're getting out of here. Here it is. This is the Abraham covenant. It says, in that day God made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt into the great river, the river Euphrates. That's Great Arabia. You look at those coordinates, River Egypt, and the great river, the river Euphrates. It's going to point you right in the direction of Great Arabia. So between those two coordinates is Arabia. Says we're getting out of here. You see? Here's the vision of horror. It says that when the sun was going down, and these sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. 1619, 2019, 2020. And it said also that nation whom they serve will I judge. 2020, that's the year of the plague. Bam! Came in right on time. And also that nation whom they serve, right? Says, shall I judge? Will I judge? And afterwards, shall they come out with great substance. So you coming out, getting out of here. But thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. And in the fourth generation, they shall come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet full. See? So say, we're getting out of here. This is where we're going. We're not staying here in the land of our imprisonment. We're not staying amongst our enemies. We're not going to love and make babies with our enemies, party and kick it and do all this stuff with them. That's all the stuff they did to us. We're not staying here. We're not taking any reparation. We're not taking any 6 to 7 or whatever states. We're not taking anything. We don't want any 40 acres in a meal. We don't need nothing. We don't need no plea deals. We don't need to take nothing from these people. We want freedom. We want to go back home. Get the hell out of here. They're trying to cancel your contract. You see? They're trying to cancel out what God got for you. Cancel your reward. Say what God got for you is better. So they can keep whatever. They can keep whatever. We don't want it. We want complete separation. Get the hell out of here. You see? So that was the point. The point I was making, brothers and sisters, is what's going to take place here is going to be terrible. So now, you know you got a vision. Said people had a vision with perish, but now you don't have to perish because now you got your vision. Said you get the hell out of here. You see? Now you don't have to go through that. And you don't want to stay here because what's taking place here is going to be terrible. People starving to death, but death never comes. Famine, no food, people eating. I'm going to talk about that right now. Just imagine, nothing, cold, freezing to death. People going to be, it's going to be bad, brothers and sisters. It says that they will bring darkness. Here. It says that they will bring darkness, not light. In that day you will be like a man who runs from a lion only to meet a bear. Escaping from the bear, he leans his hand against a wall in his house and is bitten by a snake. It says, yes, the day of the Lord will be dark and hopeless without a ray of joy or hope. You see? A ray of joy and hope. Said men would be walking around drunk, but hadn't had anything to drink. Said children be gray-headed, afraid of their parents, because their parents trying to eat them. Said that a woman would give birth in silence, just to eat the child in the afterbirth. Said the most tender-hearted man won't have compassion for his wife and his children. It says during this time that you can't go back to get your child in an event that they attack all of us. They're going to attack all blacks. You can't even go back to get your children. So you hope that they're with you during this time, because if not, you go back, you hesitate, since you lose your life. And let you know how serious this time is, brothers and sisters. So you don't want to be caught up and involving yourself, associates with these individuals because they're under judgment. They're under judgment for what they did to us. Bam. The hard call not to touch us. Said, don't touch them. Don't hurt them. Don't do nothing to them. And they did it. Say, you do it, you surely die. You see? So yeah, they did it. They touched us, consumed us, right? It's a story, brothers and sisters. They were told not to do it. Said you surely die. So now that's what's going to happen. America's going to be nuked. America's going to be destroyed, engulfed in flames, never to be a nation again. So that's why we're telling you, it's on fire. The building's on fire. And we know the way out, brothers and sisters. Go this way. Go this way. Go, go, go. You see? Because during the time, they're going to attack you. Because you're going to find out who you are. They can't allow that to happen. Because remember, I explained to you about false Israel being destroyed. But they can't allow false Israel to be destroyed because they're the ones that stole your identity. And it's Satan. You see? They're Satan. What's that? They're Satan. All right, here we go. They're Satan, brothers and sisters. It says, I'm giving out a synagogue of Satan. Look, I'm giving out a synagogue of Satan, or the ones saying themselves Jews to be and not they are, but they are lying. It says, in the ones, excuse me, brothers and sisters. And it says, in the blasphemy, are the ones saying Jews to be themselves and not they are, but synagogue of the Satan. Saying that's Satan. You see? It's Satan. Who they are. And they can't allow you to find out that you are the true seed of Abraham because you are their judgment. You get it? You are their judgment. They can't allow you to find out who you are. If you rise up, they go down. They're trying to stay up, so you stay down. They're keeping you down. And that false Israel set in place to counter your claim as true seed of Abraham. So they're destroyed. I mean, you rise up. Now they're in trouble. You get it? They're gonna attack us. That's why I say flee. Flee, 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 flee. Because they come to get you. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, the capital of Jerusalem is false Israel, right? Right? Am I saying that right, brothers and sisters? So basically, what I'm saying is, right, Jerusalem is the capital of false Israel. So it's saying false Israel, when you see false Israel surrounded by armies, know that their destruction is near. So now it says, flee, 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 flee. Telling you to get the hell out of there. Because they're coming to attack you. Because they can't allow you to find out who you are. So they're rushing to get rid of you. They're rushing to get rid of you. Because you are the evidence of their crime. It says, curse those who curse God's people. And you're God's people. You see? But they thinking they was blessed in God's people, who was false Israel. But they're not. And they justify cursing you. But then they find out that the reality is coming to an end. Because they was cursing God's people. That's why they can't allow you to find out who you are. They can't let that spread. Can't let you get word of that. Can't let you get the information on that. because that means that they're in trouble. They do judgment, and you are their judgment. You're the evidence that they're trying to get rid of in the judgment. They're trying to get rid. They're trying to escape judgment, which we know they can't. So this is what's been going on. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. She said, deal shrewdly in a way they don't see coming. That's what they've been doing to us. 3-strike law, prison sentencing, you see, max incarceration, messing up our reproduction. You can't reproduce in jail, sterilization, abortions, you see, vaccines, immunizations, falsely diagnosing us, putting stuff in our food, taking stuff out of our food that you need to so your body can function a certain way, making you deficient in vitamins, in minerals, making you weak and all decrepit. Putting stuff in your environment, putting your environments with hazardous chemicals, putting chemtrails over you, messing you all up, putting liquor stores and smokes and drugs and liquor, putting messed up processed food and everything in your communities, putting violence, taking stuff out of your community to make you criminal by survival. That's how they set their system up, to thrive off your misery. And that's how they deal truly with you. But here in a minute, it's about to become clear. They won't be dealing with you the way you don't see coming. They come right at you. Because that's how serious this time's about to be. Because they have to make a move. Because if you rise up, they're toast. You see? Their judgment, they realize now that they're guilty. And now their heaven is swiped away, and now they handed hell. You see? And I said, when the envier becomes envious, when the envier becomes envious, brothers and sisters, when the envier becomes envious, he never wants you to have anything. He's envious of you. Hated you from the beginning. Hate your guts. How you know? Because it trains you 100%. If you love anything, you keep it the same. But he changed you 100%. You don't blame the product. You blame the manufacturer. They turned us into these things. So if they was angels, you should turn us into angels. But look how our people are. Their fault. See? So anybody accusing our people said you be cast down. Said accuse our brother be cast down, which we know who that is. See? Legion. So yeah. It's their fault. See? And now things are about to heat up, brothers and sisters. They're about to try to take you out. They're about to try to take you out. Right. And they become envious of you because you about to go off to make paradise. You about to go out to be at peace. You about to go out to do great things. They never intended that for you. They hated you. They had everything at their disposal. They had everything. They've been living good. They never intended you to live good at all. Not one bit. Never intended you to live good one bit. And look how they treated you. You had nothing, and they had everything. So imagine them, the opposite. You have everything, they have nothing but hell. They can't imagine it. They said they reach out from their grave. They reach out from their grave, take you with them. That's how desperate they're about to come. When they got nothing to lose. They got to go out. So hell with it. Blow this son of gun up. And that's why our people have to be aware of what's taking place, brothers and sisters. It's not a game. They're planning your attack as we speak. brothers and sisters, this thing is not going away. You need to understand me. I'm just here to tell you what's going on, brothers and sisters. You do what you want with the information. You see? But they are planning our attack. You said all blacks. You see? Brothers and sisters, take heed. Pay attention. Invest in yourself. Invest in your discipline. 5 mathematical pillars of Islam. Reach out to your brother. I'm here for you to give you the tools you need. It's going to help you through what's coming. Unprecedented time of unprecedented trouble, the tribulations, all these things that we got to make it through so we can get the hell out of here and go home, brothers and sisters. All right, brothers and sisters, let's take a look at what's going on.
In the last 4 hours, 30 Israeli fuel depots have been reduced to burning craters, 400 F-35 sorties grounded. The most advanced air force in the Middle East is sitting on its runways, unable to move, not because its planes were destroyed, but because the infrastructure that keeps them flying no longer exists. And the IDF High Command has retreated into its bunkers. That is not a military setback. That is a strategic decapitation delivered without a single boots-on-the-ground engagement. If you want to understand what just happened, not the version that will appear on CNN in 3 hours, not the version that the Pentagon spokesperson will read from a prepared statement, but the actual operational reality of what Iran executed tonight, stay with me, because this is precisely the kind of strike I watched American planners dismiss as theoretically possible but operationally unlikely for the better part of 2 decades. Tonight, unlikely became history. If this analysis brings you something that the mainstream conversation is missing, share it. Subscribe. Because what gets said here does not get said in the briefing rooms anymore, and it needs to be said somewhere. 3 questions are sitting unanswered on every serious analyst desk right now. How does a country destroy 30 fuel depots simultaneously with enough precision to paralyze an entire air force without triggering a single successful intercept? That is not luck. That is not even superior technology alone. That is the product of an intelligence picture so detailed, so current, and so operationally integrated that it should force a complete reevaluation of every assumption the Western security community holds about Iranian reconnaissance capability. What does it mean strategically when you ground an air force without touching its planes? The aircraft are intact. The pilots are alive. The runways are undamaged. But none of it matters, because the logistical foundation that translates hardware into combat power has been surgically removed. That is a level of strategic sophistication that very few military establishments on Earth have demonstrated in actual combat conditions. And the question that nobody in Washington will ask publicly for at least another 48 hours, what does this tell us about the vulnerability of every forward-deployed American air asset in the region? That depends on the same kind of fixed fuel infrastructure that Iran just proved it can destroy at will. Let me walk through what actually happened, because the details matter enormously. And the initial reporting is already collapsing the complexity into a narrative that misses the most important elements. 30 fuel depots, not 30 random infrastructure targets, 30 fuel depots, specifically selected to create a single catastrophic operational effect, the complete paralysis of Israeli fixed-wing combat aviation. That level of target selection reflects an intelligence process that identified not just the location of these facilities, but their operational interdependencies. Which depots feed which air bases? Which supply chains are redundant and which are single points of failure? Which facilities, if destroyed simultaneously, produce a cascading effect across the entire aviation logistics network rather than a series of isolated, recoverable losses? This is not the targeting methodology of an improvised strike package. This is the output of a sustained intelligence collection effort that mapped the Israeli Air Force's fuel logistics architecture in granular detail and then designed a strike package specifically around the most efficient path to operational paralysis, the FATA. 2 was the instrument of execution, and I want to spend real time on this because the Western commentary has consistently underestimated what this missile represents, the FATA. 2 is Iran's second-generation hypersonic ballistic missile. It carries a maneuvering re-entry vehicle, and I want to be precise about what that means in operational terms, because the technical description obscures the strategic implication. A conventional ballistic missile follows a predictable arc. It goes up, it comes down, and the terminal phase of its flight follows a trajectory that existing missile defense systems were designed around. Arrow, 3, David Sling. The upper-tier components of the Israeli layered defense architecture, all of them were built around intercept geometries that assume a predictable threat envelope. The FATA 2 breaks that assumption at the most critical phase of flight during terminal approach. It maneuvers. The intercept solution that a defense system calculates based on the missile's established trajectory becomes invalid the moment the vehicle executes a course correction. The defensive system has to recalculate, re-engage, and refire, and in the time available during a hypersonic terminal approach, that sequence cannot be completed reliably. What Iran demonstrated tonight is that it can deliver precision strikes against fixed targets through the most sophisticated layered missile defense architecture in the Middle East without reliable intercept. 30 fuel depots, 30 successful impacts, 0 successful intercepts of the FATA, 2 salvo. That is a data point that will be studied in every serious defense establishment on Earth for the next decade. Now consider the operational picture from the Israeli perspective in the minutes after the first impacts were confirmed. The air raid sirens were already sounding across multiple regions simultaneously, which tells you the strike package was coordinated across multiple launch platforms, firing within a compressed time window. The defense systems were processing incoming threat tracks from multiple vectors simultaneously, and the targets being struck were not air bases, not command centers, not population centers. They were fuel depots, facilities that are hardened against some threat categories, but were never designed as primary defense priorities because the assumption was always that the Air Force itself, the planes and the runways, would be the target. Iran attacked the assumption, not the hardware. By the time the full scope of the strike became clear, 30 depots, all hit, all burning, the operational consequence was already locked in. 400 planned F-35 sorties cannot execute without fuel. The maintenance cycles, the pre-flight preparations, the ordnance loading, all of it had already begun for some of those sorties. Aircraft were being readied, pilots were being briefed, targets were already assigned, and then the fuel infrastructure that all of it depended on ceased to exist and none of it mattered. The IDF High Command's movement into bunkers is the detail that I find most operationally significant, and I want to explain why. Bunker protocols are not activated in response to infrastructure strikes alone. Bunker protocols are activated when a command authority assesses that it may itself be a target of follow-on strikes. The movement into hardened command facilities tells you that Israeli military leadership assessed in the immediate aftermath of the fuel depot strikes that this was not the complete strike package, that there were additional phases to come, that the fuel depots were the opening move in a sequence, not the entirety of the operation. That assessment is almost certainly correct, and it represents a level of strategic anxiety within the IDF command structure that has not been publicly visible at any point in the current conflict. 30 years of watching the intelligence community assess Iranian military capability, and the single most consistent failure I observed was the assumption that capability demonstrated in testing or in limited operational use represented the ceiling of what Iran could achieve. Every time Iran demonstrated something new, the analytical community would acknowledge the specific capability while simultaneously arguing that Iran could not integrate it into a coherent operational doctrine, could not maintain it at scale, could not employ it with the precision required for strategic effect. Tonight is the latest and most consequential refutation of that analytical framework. The FATA 2 is not the only system in the Iranian arsenal that has been systematically underestimated. The broader missile architecture that Iran has built over the last 2 decades represents a deliberate and strategically coherent answer to a specific strategic question How does a country without air superiority, without a blue water navy, and without the ability to project conventional military power beyond its immediate neighborhood, create a credible deterrent against adversaries who possess all of those things? The answer Iran developed is to make the fixed infrastructure that modern military power depends on: fuel, communications, logistics, command nodes vulnerable to precision strikes from outside the defensive perimeter. You do not need air superiority if you can ground your opponent's air force. You do not need a navy if you can make the ports that support your opponent's navy unusable. You do not need to match conventional military power symmetrically if you can systematically dismantle the logistical foundation that conventional military power depends on. This doctrine was not invented overnight. It was developed through a deliberate process of studying how American and Israeli military power actually functions at the operational level, what the dependencies are, where the single points of failure are, which nodes, if destroyed, produce cascading effects across the entire system rather than isolated recoverable losses. The fuel depot strike is a textbook execution of this doctrine. Israeli air power is extraordinary. The F-35I Adir is one of the most capable combat aircraft in the world. The pilots who fly it are among the best trained in the region. The ordnance it carries and the systems it integrates represent the cutting edge of Western aerospace technology. All of that is real, and all of it is now sitting on runways across Israel, completely unable to execute its mission because the thing that keeps aircraft flying fuel no longer exists in the quantities required to sustain combat operations. The question that every serious defense planner should now be asking is not how Iran destroyed 30 fuel depots. The question is how many other countries' air forces are equally dependent on fixed fuel infrastructure that could be targeted with the same methodology. The answer is uncomfortable, and I say that as someone who has seen the logistics architecture of American forward air operations in the Middle East firsthand. American air power projection in the region depends on a relatively small number of large fuel storage and distribution facilities at bases in Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE. These facilities are hardened to varying degrees. They are defended by layered air defense systems, but they are fixed. Their locations are known. And the Fatah, too, has just demonstrated that Iran can deliver precision strikes through the most sophisticated missile defense architecture in the region without reliable intercept. That implication has not yet entered the public discourse in Washington. It will. And when it does, it is going to force a reconsideration of forward-basing doctrine that the American military has not seriously revisited since the Gulf War. The response coming out of Washington in the hours since the strike has followed exactly the pattern I would have predicted, because I have watched this pattern play out multiple times from inside the system. The first public statements were carefully hedged, expressions of concern, affirmations of commitment to Israeli security, references to ongoing consultations with regional partners, language designed to signal resolve without committing to a specific response that would then have to be either executed or walked back publicly. What was not said publicly is more important than what was said. There was no immediate announcement of retaliatory action. There was no presidential statement with the kind of specific, actionable language that would commit the administration to a defined course of action. The hedging is deliberate, and it reflects a genuine internal debate about what options are actually available. The operational reality that Washington is now grappling with is that the menu of meaningful response options has been significantly complicated by the nature of this strike. A conventional retaliatory strike against Iranian territory is the obvious option, and it carries risks that I believe the current national security team understands, even if they cannot say so publicly. Iran has built its deterrent architecture precisely around the assumption that the United States and Israel will consider conventional retaliation. The hardened facilities, the dispersed launch systems, the underground storage networks, all of it is designed to survive the retaliatory strike that would follow an initial Iranian attack and enable a second strike capability.
This is a trick that professional electricians usually don't tell you. Seriously, why do we have to wait until 2026 to realize how useful this is? With this small connector, you can finally forget about annoying electrical tape. When you need to connect any electrical device, Just use these compact and fast wire connectors. No wire stripping and no tape wrapping needed. Wherever you need a connection, simply insert the wire. Before, you would spend time worrying whether the wire was secure, but that problem is gone now. Just press it by hand or give it a light squeeze with pliers, and these small clips handle everything. The wire is secured with a pressure lock mechanism. Insert it, and you'll hear.
You do not spend 20 years building underground missile storage if you are not planning for the scenario where your first strike produces a retaliatory response and you need the ability to continue operating afterward. The carrier strike groups currently positioned in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Gulf of Oman are the visible instrument of American resolve in this situation. I have watched carrier strike groups deployed as deterrent signals in crisis situations multiple times. They are genuinely powerful instruments of military power. They are also, in the current threat environment, something that requires careful thought about what their presence is actually communicating and to whom. Iran has invested specifically and substantially in anti-ship ballistic missile capability, the Khalij Fars, the Zulfiqar anti-ship variant, the layered combination of subsonic cruise missiles, supersonic anti-ship missiles, and fast attack craft that constitute Iran's maritime denial architecture. All of it is designed around the specific operational problem of how to threaten carrier strike groups in confined or semi-confined waters. The Persian Gulf, in particular, is an extraordinarily challenging operational environment for large surface combatants when an adversary is specifically equipped and doctrinally prepared to exploit the geographic constraints. The signal that the carrier strike groups are sending is one of commitment and capability. The signal that Iran sent tonight with 30 simultaneous precision strikes on fuel infrastructure is one of reach and sophistication. Both signals are real. The question that the decision makers in Washington are now wrestling with is which signal more accurately reflects the actual operational balance in a potential direct confrontation. And the honest answer to that question is considerably less comfortable than the public posture would suggest. Trump's political position in this moment is genuinely constrained in ways that are worth understanding, because the political constraints shape the policy response as much as the strategic assessment does. The domestic political audience expects strength and decisiveness. The language of American foreign policy in crisis situations has been built around the projection of overwhelming capability and unambiguous resolve. Acknowledging publicly that the options available for a meaningful response carry serious risks is politically costly in a way that acknowledging the same thing in a classified briefing is not. At the same time, the military advisors who are in the room for those classified briefings are not in a position to recommend a course of action that could produce an outcome worse than the one it is designed to address. A strike on Iranian territory that fails to degrade Iranian strike capability, that produces significant American casualties, or that triggers a retaliatory response against American assets in the region, would be a strategic disaster of the first order. The professionals understand this. The political pressure runs in the opposite direction. That tension is what produces the carefully hedged public statements while the internal debate continues. There is a variable in this conflict that the quantitative analysis consistently fails to capture adequately, and it is the variable that I believe will ultimately determine the duration and outcome of this engagement. More than any specific weapon system or tactical decision, will is not a soft concept. It is a military variable with measurable operational consequences. An army that believes in what it is fighting for sustains higher casualty rates, maintains unit cohesion under stress, and continues operating effectively in adverse conditions longer than an army that does not. This is not sentiment. It is documented operational history across every major conflict of the last century. The IDF is one of the most capable military forces in the world. The individual soldier quality, the training standards, the operational experience accumulated across decades of continuous security operations, all of it is real, and all of it matters. But capability is not the same as will. And the political will of a democratic society to sustain significant economic disruption, civilian hardship, and strategic uncertainty over an extended period is a different variable than the professional capability of its military forces. What the fuel depot strike accomplished at the psychological level is as important as what it accomplished operationally. The Israeli civilian population woke up this morning to news that the Air Force, the instrument of Israeli military power, that more than any other has defined the country's sense of security and strategic reach, cannot currently fly. The planes are there, the pilots are there, the system is intact, but it cannot operate because the infrastructure beneath it was destroyed overnight. That is a message about vulnerability that penetrates in ways that a conventional military strike does not. A conventional strike on an airbase destroying planes, damaging runways is comprehensible within the existing framework of military conflict. It is destructive, but it fits within the category of things that can be repaired, rebuilt, replaced. What happened tonight is different. It demonstrates that the logistical foundation of Israeli military power can be selectively dismantled without direct engagement, without air-to-air combat, without the kind of symmetric confrontation that Israeli military doctrine has been built to win. On the Iranian side, the will calculus looks entirely different and has looked different for a very long time. The sanctions have been severe. The isolation has been real. The economic costs imposed by decades of Western pressure have been genuinely painful for the Iranian population, and yet the program continued. The missiles were built and tested and refined. The doctrine was developed. The target intelligence was collected. The operational planning was completed. That sustained commitment in the face of significant cost is not the behavior of a government acting from a position of weakness. It is the behavior of a strategic actor that has made a fundamental decision about what it is willing to sacrifice in pursuit of what it has determined to be an existential security requirement. Understanding that decision, not endorsing it, not justifying it, but understanding it accurately, is the only foundation on which a realistic policy response can be constructed. The consistent failure of Western policy toward Iran over the last 4 decades has been the substitution of wishful thinking for accurate analysis. The assumption that sufficient pressure would eventually produce either collapse or capitulation has been tested repeatedly and has repeatedly failed to produce the predicted outcome. The evidence at this point is unambiguous. Iran will absorb extraordinary costs in pursuit of the strategic objectives it has defined for itself. Pull back from the immediate tactical situation and look at the structural picture, because what happened tonight is not an isolated event. It is a data point in a transition that has been underway for longer than most people in Washington are comfortable acknowledging. The international order that emerged from the Second World War and solidified through the Cold War was built on a set of assumptions about American primacy that reflected the actual distribution of power in the late 1940s. American industrial output, American financial dominance, American military reach, all of it was genuinely unmatched in ways that justified the alliance structures, the forward deployment postures, and the institutional architecture that were constructed during that period. That distribution of power no longer exists. The transition away from it has been gradual, uneven, and politically difficult to acknowledge within a system whose institutions and self-conception were built around the assumption of American primacy. But the transition is real, and its consequences are increasingly visible in situations exactly like the one unfolding tonight. Russia's deepening relationship with Iran is not incidental to the current situation. The technology transfer relationships, the financial system interconnections that allow both countries to operate outside the dollar-denominated sanctions architecture, the diplomatic coordination at the UN Security Council that prevents the kind of unified international response that previous crises might have produced, all of it reflects a deliberate strategic alignment between two countries that have each made the calculation that the costs of that alignment are worth the benefits in terms of their ability to resist American-led pressure. China's position is more complex and ultimately more consequential. Beijing has invested enormously in economic relationships across the Gulf region with both Arab states and Iran. It has positioned itself as a partner that does not attach political conditions to economic engagement, a posture that is genuinely attractive to governments that have experienced the costs of deep integration with Western-led institutions. The Belt and Road infrastructure investments, the currency swap agreements, the diplomatic initiatives like the China-brokered Saudi-Iranian normalization, all of it reflects a long-term strategy of building influence through economic engagement rather than military power projection. What this means in the context of tonight's events is that the international system within which the United States is trying to manage this crisis has changed in ways that limit the effectiveness of the instruments that American policy has historically relied on. Sanctions are less effective when the sanctioned country has alternative economic partners. Military deterrence is less credible when the deterred party has made an accurate assessment that the costs of retaliation exceed the benefits. Diplomatic pressure is less powerful when the institutional mechanisms that once amplified that pressure are no longer functioning as designed. The unipolar moment is over. I say that not as a criticism of American policy, though I have significant criticisms of specific decisions, but as a description of a structural reality that any honest strategic assessment has to incorporate. American power remains substantial. American interests in the Middle East remain real. American commitment to Israeli security is genuine.
Yo, what the It's so dark.
This is the Manta Sound sleep mask that is completely blackout.
And will not disappear. But the ability to translate that power, those interests, and that commitment into the specific regional outcomes that American policy has been pursuing is more constrained today than at any point since the end of the Cold War. That constraint is what the fuel depot strike really exposes, not just Iran's capability to blind an air force without touching its planes, but the broader reality that the strategic environment in which American and Israeli power is being projected has shifted in ways that require a fundamentally different approach, one built around accommodation of legitimate interests, engagement with adversaries as strategic actors rather than problems to be managed, and the construction of a regional security architecture that reflects the actual distribution of power rather than the one that Washington wishes existed. 4 hours ago, 30 fuel depots were burning. The F-35S are still on the runways. The IDF High Command is still in its bunkers. And in Washington, the carefully hedged public statements are continuing while the internal debate about what comes next remains unresolved. The question worth sitting with is not whether Israel will restore its fuel infrastructure. It will, though the timeline is measured in weeks rather than days, and the operational gap during that period is genuinely significant. The question is not whether Washington will eventually articulate a response. It will, though the form that response takes will be shaped by constraints that the public posture will not acknowledge. The question worth sitting with is the one that 30 years inside this system left me unable to stop asking. At what point does the approach change? At what point does the accumulated evidence that the current strategy is not producing the desired outcomes become sufficient to force a genuine reconsideration rather than a tactical adjustment? The fires burning in 30 locations across Israel tonight are the most recent installment of a cost that has been accumulating for decades. The hardware can be replaced. The fuel infrastructure can be rebuilt. But the strategic assumptions that led to this moment, the assumptions about Iranian capability, about the effectiveness of pressure, about the durability of deterrence architectures that were never designed for the threat they now face, those cannot simply be reconstructed and redeployed. They have to be replaced with something more accurate. Drop your analysis in the comments. The best conversations I have had about these issues have come from people watching this channel who bring perspectives that the institutional environment I spent my career in systematically excluded. Share this if it matters to you. Subscribe if you want to continue the conversation, and I will see you in the next one.